As promised, though, right now we're joined by a former Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker, a two-time Pro Bowler, co-host of the Don't Call It a Comeback podcast, host of 50 Phenoms, author of the book Walking Miracle. He's the founder of the Ryan Shazier Fund for Spinal Rehabilitation. Ryan Shazier is my guest. Ryan, great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, Jim.
It's good to have you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. So you're an inspiration to so many people. I want to get to your podcast momentarily, but I want to ask you about the book that I mentioned, Walking Miracle. How did you take football, your love of football, and use that as a way to progress forward and carry on with your path once you were hurt? What did football do in that regard?
So football, like it does with a lot of things in life, it kind of taught me discipline. It kind of taught me how to overcome. It taught me just things aren't going to always go your way. So when I was going through my injury, it allowed me to use those lessons and just understanding how to deal with injuries, understanding how to deal with rehab, and just really focus in on that. So every time I reached a goal, I would call it a first down. I know I played defense, but I'll call it a first down. And then when something was really important to me, I would call it a touchdown. So I just allowed those football moments in my life to be able to push me forward to being the guy I wanted to be.
Ryan Shazier joining us. I love the analogy, first downs, touchdowns. And I think also many of us will never forget the image of you walking on stage back in 2018 at the NFL Draft, only 1 year after you were injured with your then fiance and now wife, Michelle. Ryan, when you think back on that night, what do you remember most, and how emotional was that for you?
It was a very emotional moment for me because I remember when I first agreed to do it, I talked to Roger Goodell and I told him, hey, I think I'll be able to walk by the time of the draft. But if you would have asked my trainer, he would have said, man, Ryan, you kind of put a lot of pressure on us. And that's one thing that football helped me out with and that I really remember is the pressure that I put on myself to be able to get back to that moment. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that because I was able to walk out in the draft just to let everybody know that I was blessed enough to be able to walk again. I just wanted to thank everybody, that sent out prayers for me, that was wishing the best for me. And I thought that was a good way of showing people, hey, Ryan is getting better from the situation that he was in.
Ryan Shazier joining us. He's got a brand new podcast, which we'll get into momentarily. Ryan, I want to ask you also, I think, about Tua Tagovailoa. I think a lot of people thought of you when they saw him suffer that concussion back in September because you suffered your injury in a primetime game in Cincinnati. In fact, you went to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, the same facility that Tua went to. What was your reaction when you saw what happened to him?
So when I saw what happened to him, I didn't really have the same reaction that a lot of other people had. So when I see other players get hurt, the first thing I always look for is just if their legs are moving, if they're able to move their lower body. But the first thing I really thought about was just when I seen him get hit and his arms lock up the way they did, I was thinking more of UFC. Like I watch a lot of UFC, I watch a lot of Bellator, and I know sometimes when somebody gets a concussion or they get knocked out, that they lock up in that type of situation. But I knew with him being in Cincinnati that like I put on this post right here, that is a great hospital network. They do a great job of just trying to do what's best for the person that they're taking care of at that time. And I just knew that I was in good hands, and Tua was in good hands when he was in that hospital.
Ryan Shazier joining us. So a quick follow-up. If you watch a lot of MMA, a lot of Bellator, a lot of UFC, who's your favorite fighter? Who are guys you identify with?
So I'm gonna be honest. My favorite fighter is a good friend of mine. His name is Dalton Roster. He's actually like ranked 4 or 5 in Bellator middleweight right now. But if you was to talk about big name fighters, if we're talking about UFC, I'm a big Israel Adesanya fan. I like Ngannou a lot.
Ryan Shazier joining us. I see you working. I feel that. And let me ask you, you obviously still love the game, so let me talk about the Steelers for one moment. They take on the Ravens on Sunday. When you played, Ryan, in Pittsburgh, I mean, you've been in the middle of that rivalry. How intense were those matchups, and what are some of the moments that stand out to you most about that rivalry?
That rivalry is just so intense. It's crazy because it doesn't matter how good each team is. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough rivalry. It's going to be a physical game. Both of us like to run the ball. Both of us like to play physical football. And you see that when you're watching the game, and you definitely feel it when you're playing. And it doesn't matter if Lamar is hurt or Ben was hurt or one of the main guys was hurt. The physicality is still coming out on that field. And some of the things that I can remember when I was playing was like I have two moments. One moment was when I caught an interception in Baltimore the year I got hurt. I remember I did the Ray Lewis dance and I was just playing around and I was just happy about having a turnover. But I also remember when we played them in the playoff game before and Justin Tucker hit a but like a 55-yard field goal to, kick us out of the playoffs. So it just lets me know like just the big moments that we've had in those games. And it was just an amazing rivalry to play in when I was playing.
I love that. Ryan Shazier joining us. I mentioned you're the co-host of Don't Call It a Comeback. It's a podcast from Wondery, which highlights some of the best comebacks in sports. Given everything that you've gone through, how important is it for you, Ryan, to tell these comeback stories? And then what are some of the subjects you've been focusing on?
So to me, I feel like it's very important for me to be able to come back and tell these stories. I've had a comeback that a lot of people recognize, a lot of people know, a lot of people support it. But just the fact that we can talk about just players that were counted out, that people just thought their careers were over, like a Geno Smith, to coming back and being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and leading his team to possibly the playoffs this year, to also having teams like the University of Michigan, where we talked about their long run of losing streak to Ohio State, to actually coming back and playing against us, to even talking about Justin Verlander and allowing him to be able to come back off of the injuries he's had, win a game in the World Series, and then also win the World Series himself. So it was just awesome just to have these type of stories to be able to talk about, just comeback stories, because people love comeback stories. They love to see people overcome. And I think it's very important to be able to talk about those.
Oh, I do too. People do love a comeback. I love the reinvention concept too. So, Ryan, for instance, I mean, you're so strong physically, you're so strong mentally, and football gave you a lot of that. But you know how it is. Like literally everybody watching right now or listening is going through something. I can almost guarantee that. Everybody is always going through something, and not everybody's got that same kind of mental fortitude or that physical strength or have been through what you've been through. What would you say to somebody right now who feels like they're coping with something that's bigger than them and they don't know what to do and they think they can't handle it?
So I think the biggest thing, just when you're talking to somebody that's going through a lot of adversity, a lot of toughness right now, I think the biggest thing is you have to really focus on that no matter where you're at in life, no matter what you're doing in life, life is going to throw you a curveball. When I got hurt, I felt like I was one of the best players in the NFL, and it just that's everybody's decision. They can make an opinion on that. But one thing I did learn is that no matter who you are, or what you're doing, that life can throw you a curveball. Your life can change in a matter of seconds, and you just have to have a great perspective on what you're dealing with and what you're going through to be able to overcome it, and just understand that if you believe that you can overcome something, if you want something bad enough, that it's possible. And you were able to see that with me walking again, and that can happen with anybody with whatever they're trying to do.
I think that's so important, Ryan. And not only that, not only knowing that that curveball is coming, and you know it's coming because no matter what, it's coming. But if you know it's coming, you should be doing everything you can on a daily basis to set yourself up for that when it comes, because it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. We know this. Before I let you go, let me ask you about the Steelers. They have won back-to-back games. They're now 5-7. How much improvement have you seen from rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett since he took over?
I'm really excited how Kenny's playing, because at the beginning of the year, he was thrown in the midst of the season. He didn't have a lot of reps with his receivers and tight ends and running backs through camp because, he was practicing with the second and third team. He had a little bit of reps with George Pickett. But to me, I really think with him understanding the offense, with him actually getting used to the guys a little bit more after this bye week, he's taking care of the ball. And I think that Kenny's going to be a really phenomenal player. He needed his time to gauge the offense, gain chemistry with everybody, and we've been able to see that in his last 2-3 games. He hasn't really been turning the ball over. He turned the ball over a decent amount his first few games, but he's a rookie quarterback in the middle of the season. Now we're actually seeing him being able to move the offense and put us in position to win games, and I think Kenny's doing a great job right now.
Ryan Shazier, my guest. Ryan, one last thought. You talked about what it was like to be in the middle of that Steelers-Ravens rivalry, which is incredible. You're also part of one of the biggest college rivalries, too, Ohio State-Michigan. What was it like to be in the middle of that game and that rivalry?
And that game is such a big game, and it's so much weight that's on your shoulders because you're playing for the great state of Ohio, and then obviously it's so much rivalry from that game because of just the history of the rivalry. So when you're playing the team up north and all that goes into it and understanding that you have to go through them to win a championship every single year, it really means a lot. And I know this year has been a kind of tough year for us with us losing to Michigan. But one thing I do know is that we're going to be ready to play this week. I mean, not this week, but in the college football playoffs. And I know that if we get the opportunity to play them again, is no bigger stage than beating them on the national championship.
Wouldn't that be something? He is a former Steelers linebacker, a two-time Pro Bowler. He's got a brand new podcast out, too. It's called Don't Call It a Comeback. Great podcast. Host of 50 Phenoms and wrote a great book, too, called Walking Miracle. Ryan Shazier, my guest. Ryan, really good to have you back. It's always good to talk to you. Appreciate the energy and the message. Thank you so much for that.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be able to join again, and it's always a good time talking to you.
You too, Ryan. Always a good time. Always a good time. Ryan Shazier. I love that energy. I love the positive message, and there's so much in that. Hope you got as much out of that as I did.